Welcome to the Nice Girls Wear Scrubs podcast. I'm Allie,
I'm Cindy.
and we are a mother-daughter nursing duo on a mission to change the nursing narrative and unsubscribe to the typical mean girls club. Scorpios by astrology and nurses by choice, we want to share stories, create community, and give you actionable items to love your nursing career again. So let's jump into the episode. I cannot believe that I cashed out my retirement account twice. The one
When
time
was
was
that?
so the first time when I was a CNA before I went to get my first nursing job because they took that part of that money as my $5,000 to save to move to North Carolina. And the second time was after I had started my job, my first nursing job as a new grad. Instead of rolling it over, I cashed it out, which I'm kicking myself now because I was 26. And before that, well, I guess 26 and 27, which would have given me 5 extra years, which when time is a huge asset, it would have been so much better.
Right. The years of compounding interest, not to mention adding to it and over time, because the two things with money are time and rate of return. Like, what are you earning on it? Right. So you would have had all that compounding interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't cash mine out per se because I left a job, but I utilized my, retirement accounts for maybe a loan, or there was times when they gave you, a benefit. Like I know through COVID, we've got a benefit. We didn't have to pay the 10%. So utilized it. So when you utilize your asset, your long-term asset for a depreciating asset, it's really not a good return or a good idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you shouldn't really have regrets, but you should notice if it's a mistake, right? So don't repeat it. What's something else that you did that you wish you wouldn't have done?
Take out so much credit card debt. And in addition to that, just, I guess, use a credit card as like free money because while I was in college, oh my God, you know exactly how much I was spending. I bought so much stuff when I was depressed. So, like my first year at Boise State, I had so much credit card debt. And I worked all through school, all through my bachelor's and all through my nursing degree. And if I just would have lived within my means and not used credit
Mm,
cards, I would have had so much money saved and I wouldn't have had to take out student loans for my second bachelor's, which would have saved me at least $20,000. So
oh,
I just, I'm kicking myself because I didn't learn how to utilize credit cards from the beginning because I got that first credit card when I was at Boise State as a freshman. And I just all the stuff that I would buy, it was horrible. Like, I remember when those hanky pankies were popular and I had like
yeah,
20
yeah.
pairs of those stupid $20 pair of underwear. And I like was a college student. And just like so many clothes, I would buy clothes to go out and I kept that same, bad habit when I went to
Yeah.
San Diego State.
Mm.
And I would go to the mall for fun and if I had like I dealt with a lot of stuff during college and I just would go shopping and that was like my fun thing to do. And even today, like I went on a walk with the dogs and sometimes I feel like when I have free time, I should be going to shop or like that's what's glamorized. And I think
Mhm.
we started it or I started at a very young age
Young age. Yes, you did.
because that's what we did for
That was
fun.
fun
And
for me. Yeah, it was fun. I
yeah.
used to take you guys to the mall. You were a super active kid. And so one of the ways to get out, especially like if it's raining or even hot or whatever the weather was, it was like super fun. They had like those little like habit trail things at the malls and they could run around. You could have a baby in one arm and one kid running around and you could still see them. But then always, inevitably, always we would buy something at the mall. Always.
Mhm.
Like you were good, so you got to get a prize, and we had like our favorite stores. And I'll admit, I love kids' clothes, I love baby clothes. So probably every time you wanted some clothes, I bought those too. And so that's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have is that I just, especially going through the divorce, that I utilized money through the divorce that I should have just saved. Two, that I didn't just live in my means. Obviously, there were some things that were a little out of my control, and I always wanted to provide the most for you guys. But if I would have just learned to live in my means and be like, well, let's figure out a way to get this done instead of like, oh, just put it on a credit card and I'll figure out how to pay it off. I was good at that, but then you're always chasing that, that, that debt, that habit, and then you keep doing it. And one of the biggest things that I did was in those retirement accounts that we split the one that your dad had. And I end up spending it all through helping people go to college. I wanted to take you guys on trips because we never went on trips before, and just things that were not really, they're valuable because they're memories, but they weren't valuable in earning or reproducing. That account right now, probably close to $1 million, if not over $1 million in assets, and probably one of the biggest things I look at now and be like, oh, but at the same time, I afforded you guys a lot of things, like you traveled a lot, you got to do a lot of things with your sports. And so what I've learned is like, yes, look at the mistakes and don't repeat them, but don't sit there and kick yourself and beat yourself up because you can't live in the past. I just had this great mentor this weekend said, like, I mentioned something and he's like, that's in the past. You got to go forward. So
Well, and
what
I
else do you
think
think you've done?
so much, just talking about that, I think so much that debt is seen as this like terrible, awful thing. And a reframe that I always tell people is like, what did that debt allow you to do? So it allowed you to raise 3 kids on a single mom's salary. And while it might not have been the smartest thing, it was how you got through. And I think that's really important for people to reframe and to tell themselves when they're going through a situation that's hard, because it just is what it is. And you can't go backwards and you can't live in the past, but learning and moving forward is super important. But I think also another thing that I did was trying to think.
Well, I would just, while you think about that a moment, I would be like, I love how you say that reframing part, because for the longest time I would kick myself and beat myself up. But what that does is that you just repeat those habits. Because if you reframe it and you're like, okay, well, that allowed me to go on that trip. That allowed me to take you guys to Jamaica. If I didn't plan the trip, put it on a credit card, get the trip to Jamaica.
And I was able to go in a little boat with this man by myself at 12 years old.
Well, I didn't say I did the smartest things, but
I tell people that story now and people are like, oh my God. And I just said, no, I don't know. Like
he was nice though. You were,
thank
you were
God
so
nothing
open.
happened though.
I
Like,
know
holy
that's
moly.
true, but
woo.
yeah, I don't know, but
they were
true.
so
He was
nice
super
to us.
nice.
No, they
Yeah,
were all so nice to us. Like,
yeah,
I just remember every time we came down, like our room got
yeah,
upgraded. Every time we
yeah,
came down, do you guys need anything? Like it was
yeah,
just, it was a
yeah,
very different Jamaica trip than what most people
yeah,
think. It was just,
yeah,
I just remember it being a super fun trip and they were so nice to us. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I do think that's important to reframe and then learn, because if you're beating yourself up, you're going to repeat the same habits because you're down, you're discouraged, you're not moving forward, and you need to move forward instead of backwards or stay stuck where you are, right? So
So
did
I
you
think
remember?
one thing was I was not the saver as a kid. I would spend all my money that I had. I had jobs from like 15 years old. And I
Yeah.
never saved anything. I always spent. I was really good at like saving for things. So like you guys let me take the car my freshman or my sophomore year of college because I saved $5,000. And that $5,000 didn't go very far, but that was probably the first time I ever saved any money. And at 19 years old, to start learning how to save, not to save, but to, buy something or, be able to like utilize it, I think is a wrong way to save. And so I think learning how to save at 26, 27 years old was a huge disservice to me. And I think while I can't live in the past, obviously. I just wish I would have created that habit as a kid. And it's something that if I do have kids that I will definitely teach them about is just saving, just to save, not just to buy something.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times we're like, oh, well, you can buy that when you have X amount saved.
Yeah.
And I think that parents think they're teaching their kids about money or about saving, but I feel like that's the wrong way to go about it because then you're just saving to buy, not saving to save.
Yeah. Yes, that's so key. And it is one of the things I wish I would have done differently is that I thought I was doing well because we didn't really get any money. We didn't have the ability to have jobs and things like younger. I did start babysitting as I got older. However, we got birthday money, but then we were allowed to spend it all. And so while you guys didn't get certain big things, like I remember in particular, um, Jonathan, that he didn't get a Nintendo or whatever game system at that time was prevalent. I didn't I didn't buy it for him. And so I made him save for it. However, I let him spend all the money that he saved for that thing. So they saved the money, but they bought the thing. But what I wish I would have done differently was I wish that I would have said, you save your money and X amount gets to be spent. X amount is for forever saving. X amount is to buy gifts for others or to donate. I wish I would have allocated their money or your money and Jonathan's money and your other siblings' money like I allocate my money now. And then it would
Mhm.
teach you those habits of allocating your money instead of, oh, I earn my money, I spend my money. I earn my money, I spend my money. And literally, that's what I taught you guys. And I
Mhm.
feel a little bad about it, but I can't go back, right? So I thought I was doing a good thing. But in reality, I think it was just another bad habit, really.
Well, just that idea that there's like forever savings. It's like,
Mhm.
well,
Yeah.
what happens if something happens and you
Mhm.
don't have the money? And so I think just teaching kids and, like adolescents about that as well is like, you have to be saving for emergencies. And if like things
Mhm.
are going to happen, you
Mhm.
can't avoid them. And if you have things like a car or a house or, pets, like things are going to happen and your priority should be saving and not saving to buy, just saving to
To spend.
weather the
Right.
storm. So,
Right, right. And that's a really good idea because what you could teach your kids is like, you think, well, kids, what emergencies do they have? Like their parents are going to pay for it. But for example, like say, I remember you saved for a bike, like you wanted this one bike. So you sold your other bike, you wanted this big bike, it was
oh, I
pretty cool.
remember this.
You
This
rode
was
it
like when I
all
was
over
a
the place.
teenager, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, I think you were
12.
like 9, 10-ish around there, yeah. Um, and you sold your other bike and then you bought the new bike, but the way to teach is like, what if you had a flat tire in your bike? You had to replace the tire. Then that could come out of your emergency fund, or maybe your kid had another hobby that they had to maintain whatever they were utilizing. You could use their emergency fund or teach them that's what they save for. And then that would be really great habits to teach your kids because really, we all know that life, everything in life, whether it's physical, faith, finances, it all boils down to the habits that you keep and what
Mhm.
what you do with them. So the other thing that I wish I didn't do, and hopefully I can pass this on to you because you're a new homeowner. It's just been a year and like a month, right? In 1 month,
Yep,
it'll be a
next
whole
month.
year.
Mhm.
Yep. And so I could pass this on to you is that if you do end up refinancing your home, maybe you do it for a better interest rate or maybe you do it so you want to compress the years, like the time frame. So say you had a 30-year loan and you want to compress it to 15, don't take out money out of your equity unless you're using it for an appreciable asset, something that appreciates. If you take it out and you utilize it for something that's going to depreciate, then you're just actually your house is going nowhere. Everybody thinks their house is such a great asset, the one that they live in. But if you actually take out of that equity,
Mhm.
then you really just have a big credit card that has a little
Mhm.
bit lower interest rate than a credit card. So that is one thing. I did it twice in the lifetime of having my own home. And once it actually was before the 2008 crash, and I got in a really crappy loan because somebody talked me into it. The other thing is research what you're getting, really research. Don't rely on somebody else to be like, man, this is the best thing ever. It's the best loan out there. You need to get it. Like, okay, I'll get it. Even my uncle was selling it. I didn't happen to get it from my uncle, but even my uncle was selling it. So I'm like, if my uncle's selling it, it's got to be good, right? And so I did it. Then I ended up actually backwards in the house because then the 2008 crash happened. And then I had to dig myself out of that hole, and go get a regular 30-year fixed loan. And move forward, but I had taken some money out. We used it for some things. And now I look back and think like, man, I could have just, you know, did things differently. But that just reminds me of like, we just sat down to do taxes and I look back at all my spending over the last year. And because I have a business, it's good. I can write this stuff off. However, it is a lot of stuff we spend when you don't really
Mhm.
track your spending and you don't think about what you're spending. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I buy all that stuff for? Like, what do you even need it for? How many times, how many jeans can you wear? How many leggings can you wear? How many, jackets can you wear? I live in Southern California. I don't wear that many jackets.
I
So
was just thinking about that. Like I was looking through my clothes and I was like, oh, living in a place where I have to have 2 rotations of clothes. I'm like, I wish I could just get rid of half this stuff, but it's like you need a
oh,
basically a whole
mhm,
wardrobe for winter and fall and a whole wardrobe for summer and spring. And it's like, it's
yeah,
just frustrating because
yeah,
I feel like you need more stuff, but I'm
yeah,
trying not to do that and not have 800. But I feel like it's so hard right now too, because all what's glamorized on social media too is just
mm,
like overconsumption of everything. So like
yeah,
you can't scroll without seeing somebody's doing some
yeah.
stupid haul or, you know, things like that. So it's just really hard to like be grateful for what you have and think that you don't
Mhm.
need more.
Right. Well, the American, even since like, I got to find the post, but I was on the plane, so I couldn't like save it. But it basically had a picture of a family that looked like my mom and dad in front
Mhm.
of a little house. And it was like, I think it was in the 50s. And they were a one salary
Mhm.
family and they owned a home and they were happy and they were great. And it said on the post said what happened. Like, it's like, really what happened? Like, there's a lot of great things that have happened in our life since then, right? In the last, what, like 50 plus years. But we have become very consumerized and we are a capitalistic society. People want to make money. So everything is monetized and we sell it all and people use that to be happy. So, a couple other things is challenge yourself to be happy where you're at. And if you're not happy where you're at, then figure out why, and this goes back to like nursing, because I know for nurses, like there's a lot of money things. I worked with nurses. I'm not a big purse person, so don't shoot me if I say something crazy about purses, but I don't really, I've never owned any expensive purse. That's not me. Maybe one day I will. I don't know. But that's not me. I'm more a shoe person. I don't really have any expensive shoes, but maybe one day. But I know nurses that would buy thousands of dollar purses,
Mhm.
multiple thousands, and work extra shifts to pay for them. And
Mhm.
so, or they'd work extra shifts and be like, I can buy this purse, I can buy this purse, and then have tons of purses. So, I mean, if you're working your life away and you're buying more stuff and you don't really think you're happy, then maybe look at that. And then as we build as nurses, as we bring knowledge to nurses, though, which is what this is all about, is maybe figure out why so many of us are unhappy, you
Mhm.
know?
Well, and I
And
think also any shift worker, and it's really glamorized in nursing, and I did the same thing, is like you work overtime for stuff, or you
Mhm,
put you do this thing called shift math where, this has been a thing for a long time and I got a lot of flack for it. But you know, 1 shift equals this, 2 shifts
mhm,
equal this. And instead of doing that, just create your budget off of like how much you actually make and
mhm,
not count them by shifts, and really prioritize your savings and investing and make that a priority, because if you do that, you have so much more freedom. I did not have any freedom as a new grad. I worked
yeah,
5 shifts a week and I had nothing to show for it because I was just spending all my money and I was so unhappy. And it wasn't until I paid down those credit cards that I finally started to be able to breathe again and I could actually just work 3 shifts a week. But it really led to me being super burnt out. So that is one thing I do regret, is using those extra shifts just to buy things or like go on trips, or because I also didn't make very good money. And so if I would have just used those extra shifts, if I wanted to do them and use them to pay my credit cards down earlier, or even just save, I would have been in a much better situation. And I moved in with my ex-husband because I couldn't afford what I was doing. And I'd paid down my credit cards, but I wasn't making very good money. And, my apartment was really expensive, and I think I jumped into it. And I think if I wouldn't have put myself in that situation, I might not have moved, and I might have just, held my ground and was stuck on my own 2 feet for a while. And I think that when you're in those situations, you make decisions too that may not be the best for you. So I think I wish nurses would prioritize saving and investing. And I understand why a lot of people don't, because we
Mhm.
see the worst of the worst, and you think, well, I'm just going to die anyway, so why does it matter? But a lot of us don't want to work 30, 40 years at the bedside and
Right.
be stuck. And I think when you give yourself that freedom, it gives you so much more options, and you don't have to do the overtime. You don't have to take the jobs that you don't like. You can take the job that is less paying because you don't have so much money going out. So I just think that nurses have such a gift in being able to work overtime, but so many
Mhm.
use that gift for things, and to buy stuff or go on trips. And
Yeah. And the biggest thing is really allocating that money. And so one thing that I do teach when I talk about finances to people is like, what is your bottom dollar? What does it take for you to pay your bills? You should be saving, so you should have a minimum savings, you should have a retirement, and what does that take? And then if you do work that overtime shift, then now you allocate it to different things. And I'm a firm believer of rewarding yourself. Like the $1 Million Habits guy, he says you got to utilize some for you, because then
Mhm.
you're at some point going to start spending more, right? So that was another thing I wasn't very good at in my years of raising children, is I would give to everybody else, but then all of a sudden I'd be like, man, I just worked 5 shifts, I took care of 3 kids, we did this, we did that, I deserve some. I go on some shopping spree that spent like, mostly it was with you, a lot of times we spend like too much money, but it was fun, right? And so
Yeah.
like you end up rewarding yourself, but it's an emotional reward. So you really aren't, it's not the same as if you're doing it on a regular basis.
Mhm.
So what I would say to all the nurses out there is that you should sit with somebody. We are so bad at sitting with somebody. I never sat with anybody my whole life until I got introduced to the company that I'm with now about doing finances for people. And let your guard down and let yourself be seen and talk to somebody that you trust, because it doesn't have to be one of us, but talk to somebody and find somebody that will meet you where you want to be met, and look at your goals and dreams and let your hair down and walk through your finances, because most of us stick our head in the sand and then we make those mistakes. I will tell you, I was 20, $30,000 in debt, married to a new husband, Ali's stepdad. And I didn't tell him about it.
Mhm. So
And
even just talking to your partner too, and
right.
being really open and honest about your finances, and start there. And I know I have tons of friends that, ask me to help them, and they're like, well, are you going to judge me? And I always say,
Mhm.
that's not what I'm here for. If you want someone to listen, or just to like give you some feedback. And that's why I love doing one-on-one calls with people, is because sometimes that second set of eyes will really help
Mm.
you see
Yeah.
something differently that maybe you didn't see before. And it gives you a little
Yeah.
bit of accountability to be like, this is where I'm at. And if somebody else isn't judging me, then maybe I shouldn't be judging myself. And so I think
Right.
I wish more people, it's becoming more popular, but 5 years ago when I started, it was not popular at all. And I had to fight a lot to make talking about finances not taboo. And I still think it is. I still think a lot of people don't want to be honest about where they're at, but I think just finding somebody and talking to them, even if it's not someone you're either paying or
Right.
that is in the financial space, I think it's really important just to talk to somebody about it and open up.
And if you feel judged by the person you're sitting down with, then you should be talking to somebody else. And you have that freedom to talk to whoever you want to talk to. And because if you sit by yourself, you're going to sit in silence and you're not going to address the things that you need to address.
And you're going to overthink too. So you're going to switch
Mhm.
your budget. You're going to
Right.
maybe not hold yourself accountable. And so I think it's really important to have that non-judgmental party with you.
Right. And it's okay. Like Ali and I didn't think exactly the same when we both started on this journey. Ironically, we both started on our journey around the similar time, but for different reasons, totally different reasons. And we didn't always think exactly the same. And they don't have to, they just have to have your best interest at heart. And if they don't have your best interest, regardless of what they think, then that's not your person. You need to go to somebody that's going to coach you, mentor you, be accountable to you, like for your accountability, and walk you through the education so that you can put yourself in a better place. And I feel like if we empower nurses to be better financially, then we can make so many changes across the board, and you'll be happier. You'll like your job better. You'll go open up and find new jobs. I truly believe that if Ali wasn't set up financially, she wouldn't be looking for different jobs, because she would feel like she's stuck at the place that she's at and that she wouldn't move. And for me, I would have never gone out and did my own business as an infusion nurse had I not had that freedom of big, oh, I'm financially sound. I have that freedom to do that. I don't have to stay at the hospital. When I had kids and I was responsible, I was the only person. I didn't have an emergency fund. I didn't have my savings together at all. I felt like I had to stay at that job regardless of how they treated me.
Well, and even with my last job, I took a $6 pay cut to go to this new job. And I really feel like it was because I had set myself up. And if I wouldn't have done that, I know I talked to so many nurses who can't afford to take pay cuts
Yeah,
at all because they are so stuck. And I just hope that we can create freedom together, and you can say yes to that job, or, be able to stay home with your kids if that's what you want, or work PRN or whatever. And I think your finances are the key to getting there. And I think so many people just avoid it.
absolutely.
Our mission with this podcast is to create a community of nurses who want to change the field from the inside out. If this podcast resonated with you, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. It helps you stay up to date with future podcast episodes, and it also makes sure we create a large community of nurses who want to change the field.